Hello, BookTube. In the month of October, I'm engaged in a couple of read-alongs of books that I absolutely love, always a joy to me, and one of them is with Matthew at Mayberry Book Club. We've been doing read-alongs of books for quite a few months now, and in October we are reading Dune by Frank Herbert in preparation for the squintillion-dollar movie that's coming out this month, starring that dreamy Timothée Chalamet. Matthew and I have all of his posters. We have all of his issues of Teen Beat. We often burn up the phone lines just talking about what we think he might be thinking right at this minute. And this is one of the most famous science fiction novels of all time, usually widely regarded and often ranked as the single greatest science fiction novel of all time. Certainly as one of the greatest feats of world building, which is a signature effort and signature of science fiction. It's the story of an intergalactic empire far in the future that is based on spice. It's based on the spice melange, which is a product that it has psychoactive properties that are found in no other drug and no other combination, and it itself can't be simulated in any kind of laboratory. And everything in the world, everything in this far-flung imperium depends on it. For instance, spaceflight, faster-than-light spaceflight between worlds, is overseen by the Guild of Space Navigators, and they are only able to plot a safe course from planet to planet in faster-than-light travel by using spice to enhance the future-seeing, the prescience of their navigators. They don't use advanced machinery in this world to do that. Instead, they have to use something biological. Spice is the only thing that will do that. So space travel itself is dependent on the spice melange. Also, it lengthens life. It's extremely addictive. You die if you stop taking it, but it lengthens your life. The Bene Gesserit, an all-female society of super nuns who are involved in a centuries-old breeding program on humanity, have a whole bunch of heightened abilities that they gain from that their reverend mothers and their initiates gain from imbibing a spice concoction that is based on melange, and a whole bunch of other things a whole bunch of other effects that it has. And a melange is the only thing that will do that, and it's only found in one place anywhere in this galactic imperium of thousands of worlds, and that is the planet Arachus, Dune, a desert planet. And when we first hear of that planet, a change has been ordered. The imperium is run by a tripod of forces. There's the gigantic commercial entity known as Comb, and the Landsraad, which is a kind of lawmaking body. Then there are the major and minor houses, royal or semi-royal houses, that hold fiefdoms in a kind of feudal relationship with the emperor. And the emperor rules over all, including the Spacing Guild, with a vast amount of money, a vast amount of spice in storage, and also with his Sardaukar, who are fanatic, unbeatable warriors. There's quite a bit in this science fiction far future imperium that comes down to physical combat. It's a big deal that the Emperor has unbeatable shock troops. And it's a big deal that all the other houses have armies of their own, of varying degrees of ferocity. That matters in this world. So we have not gone beyond that. That actually matters, even though these characters have lasers. Even so, the scions of imperial houses are given extensive military training, including tactical weapons training. And that is true of the imperial house that is at the center of the story, the House Atreides, which is currently led by, when the book starts, it's led by Duke Leto, who has no duchess. Lady Jessica, who is an adept of the Bene Gesserit, is his concubine, but she is not his wife. She is, however, the mother of his heir, Paul Atreides. And she has trained him in the Bene Gesserit way. So all of their elaborate unarmed combat techniques, she has been teaching Paul all of that, and all of the Bene Gesserit ability to read bodies, to read languages, to read cultural clues, all that kind of stuff has been driven into young Paul right alongside the military training that I mentioned at the hands of Leto's war masters, Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho. Paul Atreides has also learned a good deal of the art of propaganda and espionage from Duke Leto's Mentat assassin, Thufir Hawat. Mentats in this world are effectively living computers because there are no advanced computers in this world of Frank Herbert's. They've been forbidden for centuries by something called the Butlerian Jihad. You will not make a computer in the image of a mind of man. So there's no AI in this world. The closest we get are mentats, who are trained from childhood to do advanced calculations of all kinds. House Atreides, under Duke Leto, has been ordered by the Emperor to go to Arachus and take it over. And you would think that would be an unalloyed good thing. Arachus is a place where you can make a huge amount of money. It's an inhospitable desert world, but it's the only place where spice can be found. Even with the Emperor's cut, even with the huge amount of money that you have to spend to extract the spice from the sands of Arachus, which are zealously guarded by gigantic carnivorous worms, even so, you can expect to make a large amount of money. But it's not an unalloyed good, because another house, the House Harkonnen, has been in charge of Arachus for 70 years, mining the spice, paying their tributes, presumably hoarding a great deal of spice for their own personal wealth. And House Harkonnen is run by Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who is different from Duke Leto in every way. Leto is a handsome, attractive, slim, athletic, noble man. His people love him. His intimates follow him out of a sense of fanatical loyalty to him as a worthy person. Whereas Frank Herbert goes way overboard, giving us Baron Harkonnen, who is the opposite of that in every single way. The Harkonnens are cartoonishly evil. Baron Harkonnen has two nephews, Rabban and Feyd-Rautha. They are evil as well. And Baron Harkonnen is the embodiment of evil, and he's the opposite of Duke Leto in every way. His house comes from a comb leadership. They're not ancestrally noble the way the Atreides are. They're not noble in the non-descriptive sense either. They're not personally noble. They're horrible villains, brutal people, repressors of their people. They rule even their intimate circle by fear, by bribery, by innuendo. And Baron Harkonnen is the worst of them all. Unlike Duke Leto, he is grotesquely fat, for instance. In a rather simplistic storytelling bit on Frank Herbert's part that is meant to say, it isn't meant to say, Herbert often gets criticism by the fact that if Baron Harkonnen is fat, that Frank Herbert means that to mean that he's evil. That's not quite true. It's his complete lack of control over his own appetites that is meant to make him seem evil. And him being fat is just one of those. Unfortunately, he's also a sexual predator of young teenage boys, and that also is put forward as a sign of his degradation, his squalor, and his evil. It can make for a little bit of one-dimensional reading in the 21st century, where we don't use those things quite as readily as immediate cognates of evil. Obviously, we don't. I don't know. We didn't do it in Frank Herbert's day either. Santa Claus isn't exactly skinny, but Baron Harkonnen is so fat that he needs suspensors around his waist in order to help him move. Otherwise, we presume he would be too fat even to get out of a chair. And he's thoroughly mustache-twirlingly evil. And hates House Atreides. Hates it. House Harkonnen and House Atreides have a blood feud going back a long, long time. So it is pretty much understood, as this book opens, that the Harkonnens may be ordered by the Emperor to leave Dune, but they aren't going to leave it willingly. And they might have dastardly plans in store. They will certainly leave traps behind for the Atreides, but who knows what else they'll do? Who knows what else they're planning? It seems like a trap. The whole thing seems like a trap. And yet, if Duke Leto doesn't want to take his family rogue and flee outside the bounds of the Imperium, he has no choice but to obey. And he just assumes that a combination of his house's canny ability, the Atreides can handle anything you throw at them, and the fairness of the Imperial Judge of the Change. There is an Imperial official who is sent to a planet when a fiefdom is changing hands in order to make sure that everything's above board, that nothing horribly treacherous is done. That Judge of the Change is a man named Liet Kynes. And Leto at least hopes that on paper Liet Kynes will be fair. Of course, we learn early on in the first part of this book that he's not. That he's been ordered by the Emperor to overlook all kinds of enormous violations on the Harkonnens' part of the change of fief. And we read about all that last time in the first part of this book, which is called Dune. The second part that we're reading this time around is called Muadeeb. It's just as long. And in Dune, in the first part of this book, we learn the extent to which this was a trap. It was a far greater trap than even Duke Leto suspected. Duke Leto suspected that it wasn't just the Harkonnens he was dealing with. He suspected that the Emperor had grown jealous of him and maybe a little insecure about how popular he is with the other houses and wanted to get rid of him. And this was the way to do it. Even suspects that the Emperor might send some of his Imperial Sardaukar in Harkonnen livery, disguised as Harkonnen soldiers, to back whatever move Baron Vladimir Harkonnen makes against House Atreides. It turns out all of that is an underestimation. It turns out that the Baron is willing to spend all of the money that he has made over 70 years putting Dune on the rack in order to bring down House Atreides. He's willing to expend an enormous amount of money, 10 times more than even Thufir Hawat, whose job is to be suspicious, ever suspected that he would do. And in addition to that, the Emperor is willing to send a lot more help, not just a few Sardaukar, but 5 legions of Sardaukar, an unbeatable force. All in disguise, keep in mind, because the great houses don't want the Emperor to pick them off one at a time. This is their greatest nightmare, that he will come up with a reason to single them out from the others and send in the Sardaukar to wipe them out. So it has to be secret. The Emperor's involvement in this has to be secret, or he'll face a huge rebellion. The other great houses will band together to make sure this doesn't happen again. Not only is that all of those factors involved, but also Leto has a traitor in his ranks. The House Atreides has a traitor in their ranks. And it's their doctor, Dr. Yua, who has a diamond cartouche on his forehead to signal that he has been trained, the Suk training of the Imperial Medical College, designed to make doctors completely trustworthy so that they can, palpitate the bumps and bruises of people that they could otherwise kill. The only way that a doctor in this Imperial Society will be trusted by anybody will be if they are known to be conditioned so that you can't suborn them. And Baron Harkonnen has found a way to suborn, to break the Suk conditioning. So Dr. Yua is a traitor. He intends to betray the Atreides, even though he loves them. It's a complicated plot. I'll let you read on. If you read the first part, you know why he does that and all that comes from it. But he does succeed in betraying the family and lowers their house's force fields, for instance. Carefully figures out where everybody is and how they can be beaten and all that sort of stuff. How the Atreides men can be found scattered instead of together. How they can be taken and what will be necessary to do it. And it works. And in the course of an evening, the Atreides fighting men are suddenly become fugitives in their own land, hunted as animals. Duke Leto is brought into a confrontation with the Baron and dies. And it seems like his concubine, Lady Jessica, and his son Paul have been lost. But it turns out that's not true. Dr. Yua has made provisions for their safety. Not only a helicopter that will take them out into the desert and hopefully away from the first wave of Harkonnen search parties, and also Sardaukar search parties. The Sardaukar and the Emperor very much don't want the Atreides heir to be alive. They very much don't want him to get away. Aiding them in that are 2 people in the part that we're reading today, which is called Muadeeb. At the beginning of Muadeeb, they are being helped. Lady Jessica and Paul are being helped in their escape and their survival by 2 people. One is Duncan Idaho, one of Duke Leto's war masters, who has been spared the initial attack of the Harkonnens and the Sardaukar, and helps Lady Jessica and Paul to get to the other person who is helping them, and that is Liet Kynes, the Imperial planetologist, who is helping them merely because he has sensed on some deep level that they are worth helping and that the Harkonnens are evil. He's made a purely ethical decision to help them. There's nothing in it for him. He not only sends out word to all the Fremen who worship him that they are to help Lady Jessica and Paul once they find them, but he also tries to hide them himself until at one very exciting part in this segment of the book, they are found. And Lady Jessica and Paul escape through a secret passageway only because Duncan Idaho has been willing to fight the Sardaukar at the doorway and die in their defense. Which is a pretty ironic little moment for those of you who've read the rest of the books in this series. Duncan Idaho, this is not, just to put it this way, this is not the last we will see of Duncan Idaho. But it seems like he receives a mortal wound and dies right there in the doorway defending them, and they do get away. They find another helicopter, long prepared by Liet Kynes for an event like this. Kynes himself is captured, but they get away. They ride a massive sandstorm out into the desert. And it looks like they're lost in that storm. Baron Harkonnen certainly is told there are no bodies because those storms don't leave anything behind. If wreckage falls into the sand, the worms will eat it. So there's not going to be anything left. But we saw them fly into the storm. There's no way that anyone could survive. But they do survive. Their copter goes down and they survive. They survive attacked by worms. They survive the destitution of the Dune wilderness. They survive out on the sands until they reach rock outcrops where they encounter the Fremen, the wild people of the desert of the planet Dune, that the Harkonnens have hunted for sport, and that the Sardaukar are, even as we speak, hunting in a pogrom. The reason why is crucially important to the rest of this book. The reason the Sardaukar hate the Fremen and are willing to stay on Dune even after House Atreides has been destroyed, where every day they stay is another day where their presence can be detected and the Emperor's hand in this whole thing known. So he doesn't want them overstaying their welcome, but the reason they do is because during that horrible night when they're fighting the Atreides and their men, every time during that night that they encounter Fremen, they lose. In hand-to-hand combat, they lose. This is unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. And they lose badly. We're talking dozens of men to one. And so once the Harkonnens regain control of the planet, the Sardaukar go on a killing rampage to try and find and exterminate every Fremen that they can find. It doesn't work, but the Fremen are being hunted when they find Paul and Jessica. And their leader is a man named Stilgar, who Paul has already met. He and Duke Leto met Stilgar as a representative of the Fremen when Duke Leto was trying to make overtures to them to make a common cause against the Harkonnens. The Fremens have been hunted by the Harkonnens for 2 generations. They hate them. And maybe if they can be convinced that the Atreides are different, that not all these visiting Outworlders are the same, maybe they could throw in common cause. There's no time for those plans to come to any kind of fruition, but the Fremen have received word, Liet's word, that this woman and her child are to be safeguarded. It's a tense meeting at first. It starts off the segment that we're reading today. It's a tense meeting because Lady Jessica and Paul don't have any idea that these Fremen won't just kill them for the water in their bodies. Lady Jessica has to incapacitate Stilgar in front of his men and order him to give them safe passage, not to kill them. If you don't protect me, I will snap your neck. And while she is attacking Stilgar and easily defeating him, the Bene Gesserit are almost unbeatable in single combat. While she's doing that, Paul jumps up into the rocks of the arroyo where they are, and in order to get to safety, he has only one Fremen between him and the safety of the upper rocks. He dispatches that Fremen easily, knocks him unconscious easily, disarms him and knocks him out of the way, gets to safety. Then Stilgar realizes, well, if you two know how this kind of combat, if one woman can defeat the strongest Fremen here, then you're more valuable to us alive than dead, so you do have my safeguard. You are obviously the ones Liet Kynes wanted us to protect, but I'll protect you anyway. Which seems like tentative smooth sailing, at least now that Paul and Jessica have some kind of home, some kind of power base, even though that base is being hunted and has to live as fugitives in the open desert. But the smoothness there is disrupted right away because the young man that Paul bested, once they move a little bit further on, that young man has been stewing in anger ever since, and he decides to access old Fremen custom and call out Paul for combat, saying that there was witchcraft involved, that he was unprepared. He's a grown man. Paul, we're told, is a small 15-year-old. And this grown man is a seasoned warrior of the Fremen. He has been in many combats. He has been in many close calls with the Harkonnen over the decades. But there's no choice. Lady Jessica warns him, if you harm my son, I will destroy you, and it will be horrifying, and you know that she can do it. You know that she's a match physically for any of the Fremen that she can encounter. And Stilgar also tells him, I've had enough of your insubordination. I've had enough of your uncontrollable anger. I'm telling you this is not a good idea. But if you insist on following the rules and you win, I will call you out. And I won't spare you this time, as I have in the past. It doesn't matter. This man, Jamis, is just consumed with rage to make right what he views as a humiliation at Paul's hands. So they fight. They have a ritual fight. And as we're told, as Lady Jessica notes in her thoughts, Paul has been trained in combat by her and Duke Leto's war masters since infancy. It doesn't matter that Jamis has had some knife-wielding encounters with the Harkonnen. He doesn't have a chance. It doesn't matter that he's twice Paul's size. He doesn't have a chance. And he dies fairly quickly without a scratch on Paul. Paul barely needs to exert himself to defeat this person. And you might think that that would ruin everything with the Fremen, but they're a very rule and custom-oriented people. And Paul obeys the ritual. So does Lady Jessica. And that death, that killing, really inducts them into the world of the Fremen. That's what this segment largely does. It largely introduces us to what the Fremen are like. And it's wonderful. The world building that was in the first part, Dune, is about the planet. It's about Dune's weird ecology and whatnot. And also introduces us to the world of the Imperium. This second part is really world building on a more intimate scale. It's about the Fremen, as Lady Jessica and Paul learn their ways. And this segment is bookended by single combats. The first real good set piece that we get is Paul versus Jamis. And Paul is, keep in mind, the new Duke of the House of Atreides. Duke Leto is dead. But Paul is a quintessential example of the Atreides. Noble. He says, I didn't want to kill this man. And the fight that we get in an even better set piece at the end of this segment is a Harkonnen fight scene, because Baron Harkonnen has one ugly, horrible, brutish, violent son, Rabban, called Beast Rabban by the people of Dune. But he has also a sexy, beautiful son, Fade Ratha, who he has high hopes for as an heir. And Fade Ratha is vicious, he's conniving, he is athletic, he is not the grotesquerie that the Baron is. And the set piece at the end of the section called Muadeeb is, for his 17th birthday, he is fighting a drugged slave in the arena for the amusement of the Harkonnen crowds. And it's a wonderful scene. The slave is not drugged, and he is also a former fighting man of the Atreides who's been kept captive by the Harkonnen for just this kind of an occasion. And it's a tense, well-done scene, really well done. And it's, I think, meant to show us, to contrast us, the difference between the two. I don't think it's any accident where those scenes are located. And in between, we learn the aftermath of the horrible betrayal that is in the first part of this book. We learn, for instance, that Gurney Halleck survives with a handful of Atreides men, and they join the smugglers who routinely do business on and off Dune. Gurney decides to stay on world. He's not fleeing the planet because the Harkonnens are there and he hates them. And if he has nothing left, if his duke is gone, if his family is gone, he at least has his vow of revenge against the Harkonnen. We also learn at the beginning of this segment that Thufir Hawat survives with a handful of men, again, but they are quickly captured by the Sardaukar, who then hand Hawat over to Baron Harkonnen. Hawat is a Mentat. Baron Harkonnen very much needs a Mentat. They're very useful just for household figure calculations, let alone any kind of deeper planning. And the Baron figures, well, this Mentat's Duke is dead, so logically speaking, it won't be hard to woo him to my service. That's all that Mentats care about. They are sort of disembodied intellects. So now that he knows that his cause is lost, he will sign on with me. And Thufir Hawat does sign on with House Harkonnen, but we know perfectly well that nothing is superseding his loyalty to House Atreides. He just thinks that Paul is dead. And he also thinks, as will become very important in the next section, he and Gurney both believe that the traitor was Lady Jessica. They know nothing about Dr. Yua. He never even crosses their mind. They assume that the traitor was Jessica because she's Bene Gesserit and no one trusts them. And that's often rightfully so. But in this case, that's not true. But we know that, but they don't. So we know that there were survivors. Quite a few. Duncan Idaho, no. We see him get a mortal wound to the head. And Duke Leto, no. But Lady Jessica, Paul, Gurney Halleck, Thufir Hawat, these people survive and are scattered to the winds in this segment. And that sets us up for the following segment, because we learn two things about Paul in this segment called Muadeeb. Muadeeb is actually the tribal name that he takes among the Fremen. That's who he is. That's his tribal name. His private name is Yusul, and his tribe name, the name that everyone will call him, is Paul Muadeeb, which becomes hugely important later, because one of the things we learn about Paul in this segment, one of the things that's really amplified, is that he is experiencing huge episodes of prescience himself. Not the kind the Guild Navigators have, but something broader, something much, much more powerful. And it terrifies him. He sees the Atreides banner being led across the universe by bloodthirsty Fremen who are utterly unbeatable in physical combat. He sees legions conquering the universe in his name, in the name of Muadeeb, in a kind of quasi-religious jihad. And it terrifies him. That terrifies him. The idea that he would be synonymous with a greater tyranny than the emperor of the Imperium could even dream of terrifies him. And that is getting worse. Those experiences are getting worse. And we know why. Because they are triggered, like I mentioned, they're triggered by the spice. And spice is everywhere on Dune. And when when he and Jessica are adopted by the Fremen, who live and breathe the spice, they eat it in their food, suddenly Paul is taking in a lot more spice, and it's making the experience a lot more pronounced for him. That's one thing that we learn about him. And another thing we learn about him is that right away he is dead set on vengeance. He's not dazed by what's happened to him. He vows vengeance against the Harkonnen. He is not done. He's not down and out. He doesn't view himself as a helpless refugee, even though he'll later call himself that. He is right away concerned, even before he meets the Fremen. Just when he's with Liet Kynes, he's talking about, I will make the Emperor rue the day that he involved himself in this. He is subsumed with vengeance, with the idea of vengeance. And it throws his personality into sharp relief. He's not a particularly nice character. He's not nearly as nice as his mother, for instance, and not nice to her, largely. But he's not a patch on, for instance, the reader identifiability with someone like, for instance, Stilgar or Gurney Halleck. Instead, he starts to experience a character remove, not just because he is vowing to avenge his father, very, very Hamlet-like thing. We are absolutely fated. We are absolutely fated to get a multi-million-dollar Hollywood big screen version of Hamlet starring Timothée Chalamet. That is as guaranteed as the sunrise tomorrow. But that's a very Hamlet-esque element of this story. But it's not only, that's not the only part of his remove. The other part of his character remove is that he's starting to feel these huge brushes of a big, horrible future that hinges on him personally. It's fascinating. It's far more interior and less space opera than the first part. I remember the first time I read this book, a long, long time ago, the first time I read this book, it was the section Muadeeb that I was most impatient with. Because while we're learning the names of every individual thing in every individual hold or hiding place of the Fremen, I kept wanting to know, well, okay, but what about the rest of it? What's going on in the rest of the world here? What's going on the planet Dune? Are the Harkonnens ruining everything? What's going on with Gurney Halleck? What does Thufir Hawat do all day in the Baron's employ? I wanted to know all those things. I see now the wisdom of it. You want to feel that you know Paul and Jessica's struggle right down to the sweat under their armpits. You want to feel that, especially to set up the next part. The next part, the Prophet, is the part that we'll be reading next week. It's my favorite part of this book. You can expect I will read some sections from it. This is terrific, too. I mean, I love this book more every time I read it. I don't know if Matthew has put up his video yet, but I will leave a link to his channel either way so that you'll know where to find it. Because I'm expecting that with Matthew and with Jordan Parsons reading The Way We Live Now, you'll go and subscribe. But either way, this was a joy to read this second part all over again, to learn the story of the mouse at the base of the pillar, to learn the story of how Paul comes to know and be a Fremen. He comes to know and be one. He fights his way into their ranks. He learns how to ride a sandworm. He learns everything, including the most important thing of all, which is a ritual that he will undergo a little bit by accident that changes everything. We're going to get to. So that'll be next week. We'll resume with part 3 of this book, which is the final part of the main narrative. But then we're going to read the appendices as well and do a lot of wrap-up talk as well. So we'll stretch this out to a whole month, and then there'll be the movie. Oh my, should I do a whole video on the movie? Good Lord. Well, we'll see. We'll be getting closer to that. So in the meantime, I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.